What's going on, guys? This is Rob, and if you're enjoying the content that I'm uploading onto my channel, then feel free to subscribe, and you can also offer suggestions on topics and characters and storylines and whatnot that we can have discussions on later on in this channel. Okay, so as we continue our discussions on Hiro-Kala, son of the Hulk, our journey actually takes us kind of out to the fringe of things, which is really a little weird. But this story actually comes out as part of Realm of Kings. Now, for those of you guys who don't know, and this is what's really kind of weird, the Marvel cosmology has always been this weird situation where it's just always kind of been out there, and no one had really cohesively focused on it, with the exception of Jim Starlin. I mean, he was really the one that kind of developed the cosmic opera to a degree. Infinity Gauntlet, Infinity War, Infinity Crusade, all that kind of stuff. I mean, there were stories like Quasar, there were stories like Captain Marvel that dealt with cosmic landscape to a degree. Quasar really dealt more with the cosmic landscape than anything else, but it was always just kind of out there. It wasn't really until Annihilation came along that Marvel and Dan Abnett and a whole bunch of other people actually started expanding on the Marvel cosmology. That's why Annihilation is so big. Annihilation basically built it all from the ground up, and it actually works really, really well. In addition to the Annihilation event, there were a handful of storylines. There was, Annihilation Conquest, there was a Thanos Imperative, but there was also War of Kings and Realm of Kings. Now, War of Kings dealt with Black Bolt of the Inhumans basically taking over the Kree Empire and then going to war with Vulcan, the third Summer's brother who had taken over the Shi'ar Empire. But what this did is it allowed Marvel to begin the process of streamlining things a little bit, trimming the fat on the cosmology that they made, and basically getting rid of things that didn't work and keeping things that did work. But one of the incidents here was the creation of the Fault. Now, the Fault really played more of a role in Thanos Imperative. When we had like the Cancerverse, we had the perceived death of Richard Rider, of Thanos himself. Peter Quill was believed to have died, but he actually ended up making it out. But there were a handful of things that ended up going on that saw a lot of changes being made by way of the creation of this Fault. But in Hiro-Kala's journey during Realm of Kings, he basically comes along during the fallout of War of Kings and comes across this Fault. Now, for him, observing the Fault is really just kind of like, hey, here is a rift in space and time that leads to any number of other multiverses, other universes. Now, the most notable universe on the other side of the Fault was the Cancerverse. Again, we'll get into that when we get into the Thanos Imperative, because it's actually a really badass story. Thanos Imperative, pretty sweet. It's pretty cool. It's literally just like a giant cosmic war, and it's like everybody dies. It's pretty cool the way it plays out. But keep in mind here, Hiro-Kala's on a crusade to basically wipe out the old power. Again, the old power was created as an answer, as an equivalent to the power cosmic of Galactus, in order to basically stave off Galactus whenever it was that he showed up to consume a world. The issue with this was that once Hiro-Kala, learned the truth of the old power's creation, he came to the decision that the old power needed to be destroyed. And so what he did is he created a combination of the power cosmic and the old power. He called it the new power, and he's now going on a campaign to wipe out the old power everywhere he finds it. Now, the end game here for Hiro-Kala, the end result, what he's looking to achieve, is to basically arrive on Earth and to destroy Skaar, to destroy his father, and then eliminate the universe in its entirety. And the first step to doing this is tantamount to what leads to the destruction of the microverse itself. Now, initially, Hiro-Kala, Axeman Bone and Axeman Bone's daughter don't really know what's going on. I mean, for them, they're not super smart folks. I mean, they were basically people who were on Skaar when Hiro-Kala was there. Hiro-Kala was a slave of Axeman Bone for a while until he took the old power, and then he made Axeman Bone his subordinate. And then there was always this kind of tease as to whether or not, the daughter of Axeman Bone would end up becoming the wife of Hiro-Kala. It was just something that was kind of toyed around here and there. But in the midst of their journeys, while they're observing everything, suddenly Hiro-Kala is whisked away. Now, the reason why he was whisked away to the microverse, and in truth, I don't really know why Scott Reed chose to invoke the microverse, but the reason why he was whisked away to the microverse, I imagine, has to do with basically Scott Reed going back and retracing the most significant moments of the Incredible Hulk's life. The reason why I say that is there was a story where the Incredible Hulk was basically taken to the microverse, and he fell in love with a woman named Jarella, but he also felt at home because everybody on this planet called Kai had green skin, and so the Hulk didn't really stand out like a sore thumb the way he does on Earth. Instead, they just saw him as a really strong version of themselves. Because of this, the possibility of having a peaceful life with Jarella, fostering a family, or I guess having a family, and basically living out his life in peace was something that he couldn't avoid. The issue is that much like the Planet Hulk storyline, which came years after the particular storyline where he was in the microverse, it ended up with Jarella basically being killed, the Incredible Hulk coming savage again, and realizing that his life was just going to be one of loneliness and misery. The kicker here is that at the moment, the planet Kai is currently under attack by a group called the Cyclops, and the daughter, or I guess the niece of Jarella, had basically summoned the Incredible Hulk under the belief that because he had saved their planet once before, he could basically do it again. Now, the invoking of Cyclops here is really a strange situation because it's not Cyclops like as we know him as part of the X-Men. Cyclops was a villain that goes back quite some time and had a lot of dealings with the Incredible Hulk, but it was basically just like an agent of the Dark Gods. The Dark Gods are one of these weird groups of one of these weird pantheons of gods that nobody ever really did anything with. But the idea was that that Cyclops had an affinity for the Incredible Hulk under the belief that because the Hulk had limitless strength, he had to have limitless power to go with it. And so Cyclops believed that if he were to basically capture the Incredible Hulk and use him as an energy source, he could engineer the Dark God's return. The issue is that it was much like a cat and mouse game where the Incredible Hulk's circumstances just put him from one location to the next, and Cyclops would just chase after him all the time until it got to the point where the Incredible Hulk ended up in the microverse, and the result was that Cyclops was basically beaten to a pulp. The Incredible Hulk was pulled out, and Cyclops was just left there to die. And so because of this, these beings that exist here, these weird, organisms, are basically what's left of the Cyclops, entity, which is currently invading Kai. Now, again, a lot of this is, a lot of the microverse stuff is not really important. It's really just kind of Scott Reed trying to bolster the microverse landscape, but the microverse was never a huge deal. I mean, in truth, this is one of those instances where you have like a pocket universe. And the way this works, for those of you guys who don't know, the best example that I've been consistently able to think of is to imagine the Marvel universe like a house. And inside that house, you have bedrooms, you have closets, different things like that. A bedroom would be like the ultimate universe. It would be like a big universe. The microverse would be like a closet where it's a universe within the main Marvel universe, but it's more akin to a dimension. It's a very small place, but it has its own life. It has its own, organisms. It has planets and, galaxies and stars and so on and so forth. It has its own thing. It's just a very, very small version of the universe. For those of you guys who saw the Ant-Man movie, the instance where Hank Pym was basically telling Scott Lang, if you shrink down too far, you'll just shrink down into oblivion. In truth, he was shrinking down to the point where he would enter the microverse. That's how small it is. And I'm sure Marvel will introduce that in the movie line at some point in time, probably in phase 5, to be honest. But, with regards to Hiro-Kala being transported here, he doesn't quite know why he's here. But, with him being as he is, effectively being a villain at this point, he basically lays waste to the entirety of this Cyclops force, but then also essentially resurrects the spirits of the people who were trapped inside, who had been captured. Now, the reason why he did this, and even goes as far as to say it, is because by resurrecting them, he's also modified them to the point that they are subservient to him. They are basically his inner guard. Now, this is going to be a common theme because what he's going to do is effectively enslave the entirety of the planet. But while he had basically been whisked away, we also had Axeman Bone and his daughter driving, really just kind of flying into the fault and trying to find Hiro-Kala, which they were successful in doing, arriving on Kai, and along with, all the other Bonesmen, really kind of bolstered the ranks of Hiro-Kala. Now, at this point, again, Hiro-Kala sees himself as this kind of messiah, as this godlike being on a crusade to wipe out the old power across really in any universe or any dimension that he comes across. And so while he's here, he also begins to come to the realization that there is no old power in the microverse, but there is a source of power that rivals his own. Now, this is a slow build. This is a slow thing that Scott Reed builds here. He doesn't just jump into it right off the bat, but with it being a 4-issue story, there's also the idea that things kind of have to be relatively contained. Now, one of the things that he also does is he basically says that much like the Incredible Hulk, Hiro-Kala is not going to find true happiness. And the reason why is that while he's spending time with Lila, the daughter of Axeman Bone, he kind of gets a glimpse of what their future is going to be like. And he even shows her to a degree and saying, here is the future that you see. The future you see is us being together, king and queen. He says the future that's going to be is basically me going through and just wiping out everything that I come across, literally becoming a force of nature and laying waste to the universe itself. And he says, I am destined to be this way because of the fact that my father's the Incredible Hulk and my brother is Skaar. My family line is a genealogy of rage and anger. Now, of course, Lila responds by saying, no, you're not bound by your genes. And there's a legitimate claim to this. I mean, there's legitimacy in saying that he's not bound to this life that he feels he's doomed to lead. But in Hiro-Kala, he solidified his fate without ever giving it a second chance, without ever actually sitting down and saying, is it possible for me to live a happy life? He's basically said, I am doomed to a life of death and destruction because that's just what I've chosen for myself. Now, what he also does is he gives Lila an artifact called the Enigma Force Nullifier. Now, the Enigma Force Nullifier is exactly what it sounds like, but it kind of requires us to talk about the Enigma Force. So the Enigma Force is really an enigmatic force. I mean, almost no one knows anything about it, and Marvel never bothered to explain it, probably just living up to its namesake, the Enigma Force. But it's effectively this force of energy. Now, within the microverse, it's equivalent to the power cosmic. It is the end-all, be-all force. Anybody who wields it has absolute power. They can literally do whatever they want to and reshape reality as they see fit. Outside of the microverse, the Enigma Force is basically basically just a force of energy that a person absorbs, and they become Captain Universe for a time. So it's really kind of a weird situation in terms of how it relates to people. But again, while all this is going on, while Hiro-Kala is being viewed as a god by the citizens of Kai due to the fact that he cast off their invaders and resurrected the souls of people who were believed to have been dead, Jentora is basically watching these events unfold. Now keep in mind, Jentora is the girl that brought him here. She's the one that teleported him here with the intention of teleporting the Incredible Hulk. Now, Scott Reed doesn't tell us why. Scott Reed does not say, here is why Hiro-Kala was teleported instead of the Incredible Hulk. All he really says is Jentora wanted to teleport the Incredible Hulk to their planet, but Hiro-Kala arrived instead. Maybe it was just proximity, maybe it was just, for whatever reason, but he was just the one who was there. Keep in mind, this is also during the time where Bruce Banner cannot become the Incredible Hulk. This is prior to the events of Fall of the Hulks and World War Hulks. So the reason why I chose to do this though is because it's self-contained. It has nothing to do with Fall of Hulks and World War Hulks. It never ties into it. It's just kind of out there in left field. But chronologically, and I'll actually make sure this falls in the chronology of the playlist for the Incredible Hulk, chronologically, this comes before Fall of the Hulks and World War Hulks. So at this moment, Bruce Banner cannot transform into the Hulk. But the fact remains here that, as Hiro-Kala is going through, because of the fact that he has this power cosmic slash, old power, while it doesn't really allow him to do a lot of things in the microverse, it does allow him to sense, energy on a better level than other people would normally be able to detect. And this is when he comes to the realization of what the Enigma Force is and the power that the Enigma Force possesses. He basically says, it rivals my own abilities. And he says, this force of energy can be used by me to basically, cast off and destroy the old power everywhere I find it, essentially saying, I can use this to bolster my own abilities. Now, again, during this time, we also have a guy by the name of Arcturus Tran. Now, Arcturus Tran has been a long time member of the microverse. He was really kind of like this Star-Lord of the microverse, so to speak, where he was basically an adventurer more so than anything else. He had his own stories, his own origin. I'm not going to go into that because he's not even remotely relevant in any form or fashion. If he comes up in the movies, I guess I'll make a video on it, but I have no reason to believe anybody would care about a video on Arcturus Tran. But the idea here is that Arcturus Tran was a guy who's basically imbued with the Enigma Force. He can do a lot of different things. It had been dormant for quite some time, but he's effectively, in a lot of ways, God in the microverse if he chooses to use the Enigma Force to its full fruition. The issue with this was that he had basically developed cancer over the course of his life, and the idea was that the Enigma Force was at fault. And so really the main baseline behind his adventures as a character in the microverse comics was to effectively track down the Enigma Force nullifier and do exactly what it sounds like, nullify the Enigma Force and cure his cancer. The issue with this was that because of the fact that the Enigma Force nullifier was something of myth and legend, a lot of myths and a lot of legends had surrounded it. And so people had this perception or this belief that the Enigma Force nullifier was created for the purpose of not really nullifying the Enigma Force. Instead, it was a misnomer. The Enigma Force nullifier was created for the purpose of nullifying the power of people who could threaten the entirety of the microverse and who were too much of a challenge for the Enigma Force to deal with. And so because of this, Arcturus Tran basically, reemerges with the full totality of the Enigma Force and comes to fight Hiro-Kala. Now, the crazy thing about this is he basically says, we're going to activate the Enigma Force nullifier. We're going to set this in motion, and we're basically going to wipe out the entirety of the microverse and reset its history, which would effectively mean that Hiro-Kala was never here. It was basically a way to just kind of wipe Hiro-Kala out of existence. And that's the way different universes work. That's kind of how they come into existence. In Marvel Comics, when it comes to a person being transported to other universes, it's not like your consciousness is transported to another universe. There are times when that's the case, but for the most part, whenever people go to another universe, their entire physical spiritual being goes to that universe. And so if they're in a universe that ends up being totally obliterated, they will die with it and they will cease to be. And nobody from their home universe will have any idea what happened to them. And so with like Hiro-Kala, for example, assuming there was anybody out there that cared that he existed, if he were to die, if he were to perish with the destruction of the microverse, he would just cease to exist. Nobody in the main Marvel universe would know where it was that he went to. They wouldn't know what had happened to him. So it would be like if you moved, you would just be gone one day and people would just be like, well, that's weird. And they probably wouldn't really think too much about it with regards to Hiro-Kala because again, he's just kind of a dick and has just made enemies out of everybody that he's come across. But the fact remains here that Arcturus Tran is able to put up a very notable fight against Hiro-Kala just because of the fact that, he has the full might of the Enigma Force behind him. But keep in mind here, Hiro-Kala is not entirely powerless. While he's not necessarily on par with the Enigma Force in its full might, he does still have the ability to control the tectonic plates of Kai. He does still have the ability to restructure his own physical body so long as he's touching the ground when he's damaged. And that's exactly what happens. Remember, the old power allows people to manipulate the very ground they stand on, but but those individuals who are tied directly into the old power effectively have bodies made of rock. And so Hiro-Kala can restructure his own body in any form or fashion as long as, again, he's touching the ground. So he can regrow a limb, he can basically rebuild himself, and that's what he does here. While Arcturus Tran is tearing him apart, it's also this realization that everything is going to come crashing down, that everything is going to come to an end, because with this Enigma Force nullifier being created, it's like this annihilation wave, this nullifier wave just sweeping across the microverse to the point that it's basically going to reset the entire history. Now, this is basically a way for Marvel to kind of come back and reboot the history of the microverse. The issue with this is that nobody ever really cared about the microverse. Nobody was racing to a comic book store to buy Microverse #1 or Micronauts #1. Nobody was doing that. It was a niche comic that just never really performed very well. But it was kind of a cool story in and of itself, in the sense that with the belief that Hiro-Kala would be wiped out, what ends up happening is that the truth of his power is revealed here, in the sense that yes, it's the microverse, yes, he is very capable, but where we as the reader up to this point would believe that his power was reduced, in fact, it was not. That Hiro-Kala was just as powerful in the microverse as he was in the regular universe. And so because of this, where the wave goes through and just resets the history of almost everything, Hiro-Kala is not impacted in any form or fashion. We have, of course, Arcturus Tran and his team essentially just kind of trying to keep themselves safe and reverting back to their ship. But in the end, we have Hiro-Kala surviving the entire encounter. And so what he does is he basically grabs the planet of Kai and he removes it from the microverse. He literally takes the planet out of a universe and brings it to the main Marvel universe. And what he's going to do is he's basically going to use this planet to invade the planet Earth. He's going to use it to launch his campaign against Skaar and against the Incredible Hulk in an attempt to kill his brother and to kill his father, and then go on to basically wipe out all things in existence across the universe. But with that being said, if you guys are new here to Comics Explained and you guys want to see some more of the Incredible Hulk stuff, make sure you guys hit the subscribe button, make sure you guys leave a comment, and drop a like, because Hiro-Kala's got kind of a weird story. But fortunately for us, this is about as far out in left field as we get. Scott Reed kind of gets lost out there in the weeds, but he ends up, reeling himself back in, and we kind of get back to normal circumstances. We get back to things within reason, or at least as in reason as you can be, when it comes to some guy that possesses a combination of the old power, the power cosmic, and the Enigma Force, and wants to wipe out all things in existence. But with that being said, guys, we're going to bring this video to an end, and I will catch you all later. Peace.